Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Perla Martinez. I serve as the DEI Administrator for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And we are here today on the for September's Lunch and Learn in honor and recognition of National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. We were going to have a great presentation today, talk about all things mental health and just suicide awareness and learn more about the subject and how can we best be able to have conversations around it. And I will turn it over to our presenters today. Jess?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn about how to support your loved one with, their mental health. So go ahead and just please bear with me while I go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so as I mentioned, thank you again so much for taking time out of your day to learn how to support a loved one who may be struggling with their mental health. My name is Jessica Fannin, and I currently manage the Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition, or FCSPC, as you'll hear me refer to it, as Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition can be a bit of a mouthful sometimes, so we like to shorten it by FCSPC. Just some housekeeping rules. I realize that many of you may have questions during or after the webinar. And please feel free to post these questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them after I finish going through the presentation. So before I jump into the content of today's webinar, I wanted to provide some background regarding the FCSPC. So we are hosted by Mental Health America of Ohio, and we're funded by the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board of Franklin County. So we were revitalized in 2018 after recognizing the need for a more coordinated effort in suicide prevention within Franklin County specifically. Since then, we've grown to include 57 passionate volunteers representing 31 different organizations across the county. These volunteers come from a variety of backgrounds, including healthcare, education, law enforcement, and community-based organizations, which really allows us to approach suicide prevention through a well-rounded lens. The FCSPC was created to serve as a bridge between the many organizations in Central Ohio that are committed to suicide prevention. Our coalition plays a crucial role in enhancing the overall effectiveness of these collective efforts by fostering communication, coordination, and collaboration among our partners. This collaborative approach allows us to work more effectively and efficiently, and it also ensures that our community is better equipped to prevent suicide and to bring hope and support to those affected by it. Our mission is grounded in several key focus areas: decreasing the stigma associated with mental health issues, increasing awareness of the available support systems, expanding suicide prevention education, and improving the quality of suicide-related data. These pillars really guide our work and ensure that we address the issue of suicide from multiple angles. The FCSPC is structured to maximize our impact in suicide prevention specifically. So we operate through two main committees, the Advisory Committee and the Executive Committee. The Advisory Committee provides strategic direction and ensures that our initiatives align with our mission, while the Executive Committee ensures that we remain on track to achieve our goals. In addition to these committees, we have 3 action teams that focus on specific areas of our work. The first action team that I'd like to discuss today is our Education Action Team. So this team is dedicated to raising awareness of the Coalition Speakers Bureau, which I'll explain a little bit more as this presentation continues, which features a wide range of training opportunities provided by our partner organizations. These trainings cover essential topics in suicide prevention and mental health, which then helps to spread knowledge and equip more individuals with the skills to recognize and respond to the signs of suicide risk, as well as just generally speaking, the signs that someone may be struggling with their mental health and need some additional support. The Education Action Team also works on increasing the overall suicide prevention knowledge within our community and ensures that this critical information reaches as many people as possible. Next, I'd like to discuss our communications action team. This team focuses on developing trauma-informed and evidence-based communication specifically related to suicide. Effective communication is a vital tool in our prevention efforts as it helps to normalize conversations around mental health and ensures that people know where to turn to for help. The communications action team works to craft messages that are not only informative, but also are sensitive to the needs of those who are struggling. Lastly, I'd like to discuss our data and research action team. So accurate and comprehensive data really is essential for effective suicide prevention. Our data and research action team is responsible for collecting relevant suicide death data and including it in the annual Franklin County Suicide Report. This report is a critical resource for our community and provides insights that help us understand the scope of the problem and evaluate the effectiveness of our initiatives. The team's work also ensures that our strategies are informed by the most current data available. The 2024 iteration of the Franklin County Suicide Report is also planned to be released this fall. Looking into the FCSPC's 2024 to 2026 strategic plan, we really focus on three primary strategies. The first strategy being support data-informed planning and decision-making for countywide suicide prevention. So we are committed to increasing the availability of suicide-related data by developing comprehensive reports in partnerships with other organizations with a focus on our priority populations. So our priority populations that we currently focus on is the veteran community, youth, older adults, the Black and African American community, as well as the refugee, immigrant, and new American community. So data tells us that these specific communities are at an increased risk for suicide. Expanding our role as the actionable arm of the Franklin County Suicide Fatality Review Team is also a key objective. By taking the insights gained from this team's work and translating them into concrete actions, we can better address the root cause of suicide in our community. Finally, we aim to increase the utilization of suicide data by working with partners to develop shared indicators for suicide prevention. This collaborative approach ensures that all of our efforts are aligned and focused on achieving measurable outcomes. The second strategy that guides our work is increasing support from partners, friends, and family, which is exactly why we're all here today, to learn how we can support those individuals in our lives that may be struggling with their mental health or may even be contemplating suicide. Training and education are at the heart of this strategy. We are coordinating efforts to provide more training opportunities to help people identify and support those at risk of suicide. Additionally, we are working to increase awareness of resources available to those who are struggling. By making sure that people know where to turn to for help, we can ensure that more individuals receive the support they need before a crisis occurs. The last strategy that guides our work for 2024 to 2026 is the reduction of access to lethal means. So one of the most effective ways to prevent suicide is by reducing access to lethal means. We are coordinating with community partners to promote safe storage practices, policies, and education around lethal means. This includes distributing safe storage materials to community members across Franklin County. By taking these proactive steps, we can significantly reduce the risk of suicide in our community. Now that we're all a little bit more familiar with the Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition and the efforts that we do specifically targeted for the Franklin County community in order to support them, we can get into kind of the bulk of today's webinar, so why we're all here. So I just wanted to kind of do a high-level overview first of the things that we'll be discussing today. So we will be discussing the prevalence of suicide in Franklin County, signs that someone may need support, how to communicate your concern, national and local resources that are available for assistance, as well as some educational opportunities. So now looking into discussing the prevalence of suicide in Franklin County. When I was previously discussing the FCSPC's Data and Research Action Team, I mentioned the development of a Franklin County suicide report. So the following graphs and figures that you'll see in the next couple slides are pulled from the 2023 iteration of that report. And as I mentioned, the 2024 report should be hopefully released this fall. So looking at the prevalence of suicide in Franklin County, from 2016 to 2020, the suicide death rate among Franklin County residents stayed about the same. So in 2016, we can see that it was sitting at around 10.4 and increased just slightly in 2020 to 10.9. From 2016 to 2020, residents aged 45 through 64 and 85 years older had the highest rates of death by suicide. Looking at mechanism of death, so we can see that from 2016 to 2020, firearms were used in half of all suicide deaths as the mechanism of death. So again, this data really goes to support our work in that was identified in our strategic plan of reducing access to lethal means and ensuring that lethal means are stored safely. Looking at the gender difference between rates of suicide between males and females. So what this data tells us is that cisgendered males are more likely to attempt less frequently, but use more lethal methods, while cisgendered females are more likely to attempt more frequently and use less lethal methods. So we can see that cisgendered males have a higher death by suicide rate at around 18.4 in 2020, whereas females, cisgendered females, have a death by suicide rate at 4.2. Now looking into the suicide rate among different residents. So the suicide rate was highest among non-Hispanic white residents and lowest among Hispanic and Latino residents. So another priority of the FCSPC's Data and Research Action Team, is to address data gaps present in suicide death data, specifically focusing on marginalized communities. By fully understanding the prevalence of suicide in Franklin County in specific populations, the FCSPC is able to adapt our efforts to ensure that these populations are supported and that resources are being shared with this population, and also working to increase the knowledge of the available resources. Now looking into the potential warning signs that your loved one may exhibit that may indicate that they are struggling with their mental health, need additional support, or even maybe contemplating suicide. So we'll just be talking about a little bit more specifically around these general areas. So verbal clues and signs, behavioral clues and signs, mood, as well as situational. So it really is vital to be aware of any signs that an individual may exhibit to their loved ones or social circle that may indicate that they need additional support. When we are aware of the signs to look out for, we can step in and provide additional support as needed. And I also want to share that if anyone exhibits any of the mentioned warning signs, it really is imperative that they be taken seriously. The more signs exhibited, the greater the risk of a potential suicide attempt. Looking into now verbal signs specifically. So of course, there could be many more verbal signs that an individual could communicate with their social circle than the ones that you see on your screen today. However, I've provided examples of some of the more obvious verbal phrases that you may hear an individual express. So individuals who are struggling with their mental health may have an increase in negative self-talk or self-criticism. They may even doubt their ability to overcome certain challenges they experience in their daily life, or may even view reaching out for support as being a burden. More often than not, individuals who may need support with their mental health may also sometimes feel an immense sense of hopelessness or dread. This may be communicated verbally with their social circle through phrases like, "What's the point?" or "Things will never get better," or "Things will never improve." Losing interest in previously enjoyed activities is also an indicator that an individual may be struggling with their mental health. It can also be a sign of depression as well. I want to touch a little bit on this last one here. I'm going to commit suicide. So I've included this phrase because I want to discuss proper language usage when speaking about suicide specifically. So the preferred terms when discussing a suicide death is died by suicide, taking one's own life, or killing oneself. We really want to try to avoid using the language commit because there is that negative connotation and connection between other negative acts that use the word commit. So for example, committing a sin, committing a crime. So the preferred terms again are died by suicide, taking one's own life, and killing oneself. And we try to use these terms because they're evidence-based and trauma-informed. And most importantly, they're also non-judgmental and they are more factual in nature. So listening for these verbal cues can help identify when someone may be struggling with their mental health, which then will allow you to step in and offer support or encourage them to seek professional help. Now looking into potential behavioral signs that an individual may exhibit. Any increased use of substances, so increasing use of alcohol or drugs, looking for a way to end their lives, such as searching online for methods or means, withdrawing from activities, isolating from friends and family. That's a really key indicator that someone may just need additional support as they're not experiencing the same joy that they used to by engaging with their friends and family. And they may also not feel the same emotions that were previously felt by through activities that they used to enjoy. Struggling with self-care can also be indicative that an individual may be struggling with their mental health. So some examples of self-care activities could be personal hygiene, preparing and cooking meals, as well as taking care of the area in which you live. So home care, dishes, vacuuming surfaces, laundry, all of those things. Another potential risk sign in regards to behavior specifically is an increase in engaging of risky behaviors. So risky behaviors could be classified as speeding excessively, engaging in self-harm as examples. Additionally, fatigue or mania. So this is also in congruence with any symptoms of insomnia, not being able to stay asleep or to fall asleep initially, as well as sleeping too much or sleeping too little. Those can also be behavioral signs as well. Visiting or calling people to say goodbye, and giving away prized possessions. And again, many more behavioral signs could be observed than the ones that I am listed and discussing here today. So it's really important that even if you notice, maybe you're not sure if something could be a behavioral sign, I would say in this instance, kind of go with your gut feeling. If you notice that something, in someone's behavior seems a bit different than how they usually act or how you're used to them acting or behaving, it's always, always worthwhile just to check in with that individual and let them know that you're available to support them in whatever way would be best for them. Also looking into mood changes as well. So as I previously mentioned, any changes in overall energy level, sleeping habits, or even eating habits, as well as a sudden change in physical appearance and or personality. Some other feelings that individuals may experience through their mood would be, irritability, feelings of humiliation or shame, any increase in the negative emotions such as agitation or anger, relief or sudden improvement as well. This can be surprising to some, so I want to discuss this a little bit more in depth here. So relief or feelings of relief or a sudden improvement in behavior actually may indicate that that individual has made a decision to attempt to take their own life. So they may feel at peace with the idea that their suffering will soon end, which can lead to an improvement in mood or behavior. Additionally, people who are suicidal or experience suicidal ideations or suicidal thoughts often feel out of control in their own lives. So, for example, maybe once they have decided to take action, they may feel a renewed sense of control, which can manifest then as feelings of calmness or feelings of relief, as well as diagnosis of certain mental health struggles, for example, depression and anxiety as well. Now looking into some situational signs, again, many more situations could put into play pre-suicide attempt conditions. However, the ones that I'm discussing here today are just some of the more obvious. So history of mental illness, previous suicide attempt, any financial problems that one may experience, death of a loved one, especially if by suicide. I want to touch a little bit more on this one and describe it a little bit more in depth. So, um, another situational sign that I want to shed light on is also the death of a celebrity or someone held in high esteem by society, especially if by suicide. So that could mean an actor, an artist, a musician, etc. In that specific situational sign can be especially impactful on our youth, especially if they are a really big fan of the individual who died, or followed them on social media, things along those lines. So it doesn't always have to be, a loved one doesn't have to be limited to the definition of the people that we see in our daily life, the people that we engage with daily, our friends, our family, our coworkers. But they can also be people that we've engaged with through social media or are a really big fan of their work, or as I mentioned, anyone held in high esteem by society, for example, a celebrity. Also, death of a pet. So, pets are wonderful, wonderful protective factors against suicide. So, adversely, when we look at it through the other lens, the death of a pet can be very traumatic for individuals, especially as I know a lot of us who may even own pets view them as members of our family. So, really important to consider that as well. And check in with that individual, making sure that they're okay, making sure that they are aware that you are an identified support person for this individual. And they can reach out and gain that additional support as needed. Divorce can also be a potential situational sign that may indicate that someone will go on to struggle with their mental health or impact them negatively. And that also goes for breakups, general interpersonal relationship struggles. Ongoing chronic medical condition or diagnosis of a serious or terminal illness can also be a situational sign, as well as TBI or traumatic brain injury. So, one of the FCSPC's partner organizations is the Ohio Brain Injury Program. And in their recently released biennial report on the impact of TBI on the people of Ohio, it was found that in 2021, suicide was the leading intent or mechanism of TBI related death, which was largely attributed to deaths among males. Any history, childhood history of abuse or neglect could also be a potential situational sign, as well as not feeling connected to the community or feeling connected to other individuals in our daily life and the people that we meet. So few friends or healthy relationships can also potentially lead that individual to feeling that they're alone, feeling that there's no way for them to get support, kind of feeling that they're alone and not able to access support that they may need. Additionally, legal problems. So that could mean maybe a recent incarceration or anything along those lines, substance use, and poverty or homelessness as well. And traumatic experiences, I want to touch on that a little bit more in depth and provide some examples of traumatic experiences. So one example that comes to mind is military combat specifically. So veterans are at an increased risk for suicide and are one of the target populations that the FCSPC specifically supports. Also, assault or undergoing a violent experience, such as domestic or sexual violence, would also be classified as a traumatic experience as well. So now that we have an idea of what to look out for that may indicate to us that an individual or a loved one may be struggling with their mental health and need some additional support, I also want to, before we get into how to navigate that conversation, I want to provide some general tips for success in order to keep in mind um, before we begin that conversation. So, it really is critical to ensure the proper time and place to begin this conversation, right? So we want to try to have some privacy if possible. We also want to try to go into the conversation with an open mind. So I realize that this conversation may be uncomfortable to have with your loved one, or you may feel out of your depth at times. So it really is critical to remove any preconceived notions or biases that you may have about that individual before you go into this conversation. You also want to take your time. This is not a conversation that needs to be rushed. So this shouldn't be, okay, Susan, I have 5 minutes for you on the clock. Let's touch base and let's figure out what's going on with you, right? That's not how we want to approach this conversation. We want to really do a lot of work before we begin this conversation to create a safe and an open space. So I don't know about you all, but for me, discussing mental health can be really challenging, and I view it as something that's very deeply personal. So, by being that identified support person, it's also really critical to ensure that you're creating a safe and an open environment where that individual feels comfortable disclosing something so deeply personal, right? Their mental health. We also want to try not to interrupt the individual. This is their time to disclose what they are struggling with and for you to let them know that they can lean on you for support. Flexibility, I want to talk about this one as well. So, if your loved one doesn't want to talk to you, which you may run into, you may find that they are more willing to talk if you can reduce the intensity of the interaction. So instead, for example, like sitting at the dinner table and saying, "Okay, we're going to have this conversation." It may be helpful to reduce the intensity of that interaction by engaging in a joint activity together. So that could look like going on a walk, playing a card game, anything, coloring, for example, depending on the age of the individual you're engaging, any activity where they're able to kind of focus on that as well, instead of just focusing only on the fact that this conversation is happening. I think that giving them an outlet for their, anxiety or anxious feelings that they may have as a result of this conversation can go a long way in ensuring that they feel comfortable, again, creating that safe, open space for them to disclose. Um, Additionally, your loved one may be more willing to talk with someone else. For example, another family member or a friend. So it's also important to be flexible in that mindset of who we can engage in this conversation, as well as the different activities that we can do to relieve stress on that individual. Because again, we want to create that safe, open space. So now getting into communicating your concern. So now that we understand the signs to look for that may indicate that an individual may be struggling with their mental health or may even be contemplating suicide, let's get into how to navigate the conversation. It is helpful to communicate exactly what you've observed. So, this will ensure that the conversation is more factual in nature. So, for example, we can do that through the use of I statements, right? Communicate your concern about specific and observable behavior. For example, I have noticed that you've been drinking more than usual lately, or I've noticed that you haven't been able to attend our book club, right? Pulling that withdrawing from friends and family or previously enjoyed activities, things along those lines. And then, of course, we also want to listen and communicate empathy, always above all, and really spend a lot of time thinking about how the person may feel. So, for example, if they're talking about how work has been a lot on them recently, they're not sure how they're going to get everything done. having some of those feelings, it may be helpful to kind of reflect back what you're hearing. For example, saying work sounds really overwhelming right now. Additionally, looking into other key skills to be able to have this conversation with your loved one effectively, right? Communicating your concern. It's really helpful to utilize reflective listening or active listening, as it's sometimes known. So we want to listen with the goal to understand, not to respond. I know sometimes when I'm engaging in conversations with maybe friends or family members, it feels that they're not really listening to what I'm saying and they're just waiting for an opportunity to share what they want to say, which may not be in relation in any way, shape, or form with what I'm saying in the moment. So again, we want to listen with the goal to understand, not the goal to respond. Another aspect of reflective listening is reflecting back what you have heard and then asking whether you have understood your loved one correctly. So, what that could look like is saying, if an individual is disclosing to you and they're sharing that they are struggling with, engaging in their friends or being invited to things with their friends. You could hear that, or you could say, what I'm hearing is that that you're frustrated by, not being invited to hang out with your friends in any specific situation. So kind of reflecting back and paraphrasing what you've heard and asking if that's correct. That also will communicate with that individual that, again, you're listening to understand, you're listening to increase your understanding, and then in turn use that understanding to support that individual. You're not listening to respond. Also asking questions to improve your own understanding of their experiences and point of view. In this, we really want to try to focus on the use of open-ended questions, right? So we don't want to ask questions that will receive a yes or a no answer. We want to ask questions that's like more along the lines of, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're experiencing, or how do you feel about that, and things along those lines, where they can answer the question in a way that provides a little bit more information than just a binary of yes or no. Open-ended questions are also really helpful in ensuring that the conversation continues, as opposed to, maybe that individual saying yes or no to a specific situation, and then you're not really sure what to talk about next. And as I mentioned previously, we want to express empathy for what they're feeling. And additionally, when you speak to this individual and engage your loved one in this conversation, where you're able to communicate your concern based on the signs that you've observed, it's really important that you use a calm tone of voice and speaking style. So speak a little bit slower, ensure that you have, a calm tone of voice. We don't want to seem accusatory or anything like that. You also want to use brief, concise sentences, and also allow time for your loved one to process what you have said and respond. So this may be, kind of a slower conversation, right? Because we're talking about a pretty heavy topic. So, there might be some instances where it'll take a couple minutes for them to respond because they're not exactly sure necessarily how to formulate their emotions into words that can then be communicated effectively to someone else. So some examples of supportive phrases that you could use when engaging your loved one in this type of conversation could be, I'm here for you, I'm on your side, we'll get through this. Excuse me, that we really is key to let them know that they're not alone, right? Not you'll get through this, we will get through this. I'm part of your team, I'm here for you, I care about what happens to you. Can you tell me more about what's been on your mind lately? Again, using those open-ended questions. I'm hearing that you feel blank. Again, using those reflective and active listening cues. I care about you. I'm here to help however I can. Again, we really want to use these phrases to not only show that individual that you care about what happens to them and that they're not alone, but also that they can seek you out for, potentially in the future if, they end up struggling with their mental health again in the future. Looking at a method for communicating and collaborating with a loved one who may be struggling with their mental health. LEAP is a really effective tool. It stands for listen, empathize, agree, and partner. And it really delineates the steps in a specific, easy to remember way as to the important priorities that you should pay attention to when engaging an individual in a conversation where you communicate their concern about their mental health and the signs that you've observed. So listen, you want to try to understand what the person is telling you about themselves and their experiences. Again, we want to use that reflective and active listening, reflect back what you have heard without your opinions or ideas. You want to empathize with that individual. So you want to empathize with how that person feels about their experiences and symptoms without necessarily agreeing with their view of reality. So what that could look like is, saying, that sounds scary. Do you feel frightened? Kind of asking some questions that can help you understand the emotional state that they're at or the emotional state that they were in previously in regards to a specific situation. Agree, you want to find areas of agreement, especially goals that you both want. So, for example, goals could be to increase the individual's ability to utilize effective coping skills, or even reaching out when they need additional support. Partner, that could look like collaborate to work on agreed upon goals, such as scheduling an appointment with a mental health clinician or contacting 988. So when you have this conversation with a loved one, it is critical to ask them directly about suicidal intent. Asking the question can be adapted based on your comfortability with the situation and your relationship with that individual. For example, if I noticed that my sister was exhibiting the warning signs previously mentioned, I would feel comfortable with asking her directly, "Are you thinking about killing yourself?" Whereas if I noticed that my coworker was exhibiting warning signs, I may want to phrase the question by, "I've noticed that you don't seem like yourself lately. I'm wondering if you're thinking about suicide." So asking the question can be very flexible, of course, and you can really do what feels best for you. However, I do want to state that sometimes when individuals ask another individual directly about thoughts of suicide, they may use the phrase, "I'm wondering if you're thinking about harming yourself." I want to be very clear that those two questions are not the same. I'm wondering if you're thinking about suicide is different than I'm wondering if you're thinking about harming yourself. There is something called non-suicidal self-injury, or NSSI, and that could be self-harm activities. So while an individual could engage in self-harm activities, that doesn't necessarily indicate that that is a suicide attempt, right? So if you do ask the question, "I'm wondering if you're thinking about harming yourself," you need to follow up and specifically state suicide directly, right? So stating it directly, I know it can be scary. There's a lot of stigma associated with, and a lot of taboo associated with suicide specifically, but studies have shown that asking about suicide directly eliminates that taboo, right? Because you're showing that you're not scared to say the word. And it actually goes a long way in creating that safe, open space where an honest dialogue can be had about an individual's mental health. Asking someone will not plant the idea into their mind. I want to repeat that. Asking someone directly about suicide will not plant the idea into someone's mind. We also don't want to imply judgment when asking an individual about suicidal intent. Again, we want to create a safe and open space for that individual to disclose what they are struggling with. Asking the question by stating, "You wouldn't take a stupid risk and try to kill yourself, would you?" passes judgment on that individual and may cause that individual to shut down, and not feel comfortable with continuing on with the conversation. If an individual answers yes, it is critical to refer them to a professional resource as soon as possible. This is also an opportunity to create a plan with the individual regarding the next steps in ensuring that they become connected with a mental health clinician or a mental health resource. So some of those resources that are available for referral, I will be discussing. So these are both local and national mental health resources that are available, especially in the instance where an individual has disclosed that they are contemplating suicide. There is so much stigma in the world regarding sharing mental health struggles. Because of this, individuals may feel resistant to seeking help. As the supportive person, you are in a position to normalize help-seeking behavior, such as speaking with a mental health clinician or using a national or local mental health resource. A way that help-seeking behavior can be normalized is by self-disclosure. For example, discussing a time in your life when you reached out for assistance. Maybe you even have experienced a similar struggle as the individual that you're supporting and can speak to how seeking help improved your life. Now reviewing some national hotlines. So 988 is the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is available 24/7 through calling, texting, or like IM internet chatting on their website. And 988 offers access to trained crisis counselors who can help people experiencing emotional distress. Another really amazing benefit about 988 that I always love to describe and increase awareness of is that individuals can also dial 988 on behalf of someone else. So if you're not exactly sure how to have this conversation with the individual or what to do regarding next steps, you could always offer to call 988 together with that individual and be there to support them as they, kind of touch base with the trained crisis counselor. So again, you can call 988 on behalf of someone else, even before you have this conversation with the individual as well, if you just need some additional tips and guidance on how to navigate that. But 988 is a wonderful, wonderful resource for those that are experiencing mental health struggles, as well as the supportive individuals who want to support and help someone that they think may be even contemplating suicide or just struggling with their mental health. Crisis Text Line is another great resource. It's available 24/7 by texting home to 741-741. And Crisis Text Line serves anyone in any type of crisis by providing access to a free 24/7 support via a medium people already use and trust, text. So very similar to 988. And another really great resource for individuals, especially because, sometimes individuals may feel uncomfortable talking verbally, like on the phone to someone that they don't know about something very deeply personal. So that's why it can be really helpful to offer to be there with the individual that you've identified as needing a bit more support, and kind of making that process go a little bit more smoothly. Now looking at some local mental health providers. So as I mentioned, the FCSPC is hosted by Mental Health America of Ohio. And in one of the programs that MHA Ohio offers for free to Franklin County community members and residents is the Get Connected program. So the Get Connected program is a free service that can help individuals navigate the treatment system of Central Ohio. So they provide education, referrals, and assistance in navigating the mental health and substance use treatment system in Central Ohio. And they can be reached by calling or texting 614-242-4357. Another really wonderful resource is the Adam H. Provider Network. So if you're familiar with the Psychology Today's Find a Provider portal, it's very similar. So what you can do is go to this website, and then you'll see that it's an interactive online directory that can be used to apply filters and find mental health and substance use sources that meet your unique needs. So for example, if you have a preference regarding the gender of the clinician, if you would like your clinician to take a certain insurance, if you would also like them to have specific experience in a certain treatment modality, etc. So if you're interested in, finding a mental health clinician or gaining some increased education regarding how to navigate the mental health and substance use treatment system of Central Ohio, or just looking to begin your healing journey by attending therapy, these resources are really great to use. Now, looking into some potential training opportunities if you're interested in just generally increasing your awareness and skill level, and specifically supporting those that are struggling with either suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts or their mental health. The first training that I'd like to discuss is mental health first aid training. So it's a free training, and there are two types. There is adult mental health first aid and youth mental health first aid. And youth mental health first aid is designed for those working with adolescents or who want to support adolescents specifically. So it's an evidence-based program that teaches adults how to identify, understand, and respond to the signs of mental illness and substance use disorders. So it's a very comprehensive training. It's 8 hours, and it can be virtual, blended, so like a hybrid situation, or in person. And the training is intended for those who live in and around the Ohio area. So Mental Health America of Northern Kentucky and Southwest Ohio can provide mental health first aid training to Ohio residents at no cost. Another training that I'd like to discuss is what's known as a gatekeeper training. So according to the CDC Prevention Resource for Action, a gatekeeper helps to prevent suicide by being trained to identify people who may be at risk for suicide or suicidal behavior, and to respond effectively by facilitating referrals to treatment and other supportive services. So it really is a training for anyone that's in a position to recognize that someone else may be struggling with their mental health. So when we view it through that lens, that's all of us, right? That's everyone that we meet in our daily life. That's everyone that we engage with, because we are all in a position to recognize and step in and provide support when we notice those signs and those clues that I previously discussed. So suicide prevention is everyone's business, and everyone can play a role. So the specific type of gatekeeper training that I want to discuss today is called Question, Persuade, and Refer, or QPR. So by becoming trained in QPR, you will know how to recognize the warning signs of suicide. You'll learn how to offer hope, and you'll learn how to connect others with life-saving services. Some benefits of becoming trained in Question, Persuade, and Refer is you'll learn life-saving skills. You'll have increased confidence in persuading someone to get help or seek supportive services. And there'll be an increased knowledge of mental health resources that are available. So QPR is an evidence-based emergency mental health intervention for suicidal persons that was created in 1995 by Dr. Paul Quinnett. So the QPR Institute likes to equate this type of training as CPR. So CPR is, an emergency response training for physical health issues, right? If someone may be choking. QPR is mental health version. And it's very, very flexible. So it can be 60 minutes or 90 minutes, with the 90-minute training including a role play. It can also be virtual or in person. And individuals will come away with a certificate that is valid for 2 years, as well as access to role plays and pieces of literature. And thanks to the support from our generous funder, the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board of Franklin County, the Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition is able to offer this training at no cost to Franklin County residents, community members, and organizations. The FCSPC also hosts a speakers bureau, which is essentially a one-stop shop for all the training opportunities that are offered by our partner organizations. The request form can be found on our website, and on your screen here, you can see it's just a snapshot of our website. And our website is franklincountysPC.org. So you can just scroll to the bottom and see that request a speaker form. And that's how you can see all of the training opportunities that the FCSPC is able to coordinate. I want to share my contact information, but I really do hope that this presentation aided you in feeling more equipped to support your loved ones with their mental health through empathy and practical steps. Supporting a loved one in this way can be tough, so I really want to reiterate the importance of self-care through this process. I always say you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So we have to ensure that we're taking care of ourselves in order for us to be able to take care and support of other people. So my email is on the screen, jfannin@mhaohio.org, if you would like to reach out, provide feedback from this webinar, or potentially schedule a training. And our website, where you can learn more about the FCSPC and all the work that we're doing to engage Franklin County community members in suicide prevention, can be found there as well. Additionally, we also have a presence on social media. So we have a Facebook page, an Instagram account, a LinkedIn account, as well as an X or Twitter account. And our handles are the same, just FCSP Coalition or Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition. But just to summarize today's presentation, I always want to encourage you to remember to listen without judgment, offer support, and encourage professional help or help-seeking behavior, and kind of work to normalize that. And also be there through the ups and the downs of the healing journey. Healing is not linear, right? Sometimes it feels like we're climbing a mountain one day, and sometimes it can feel that, we're walking on a plateau the next day. So mental health journeys can be surprising at times, they can be challenging at times, but it's always essential to support the loved one and support that individual as much as you can during this process. And I want to leave you with the following reminder. You don't have to have all the answers to be a source of comfort and support. So I want to repeat that. You don't have to have all the answers to be a source of comfort and support. Reaching out, checking in with that individual, communicating to them that you're able to support them as needed and that you care about what happens to them goes such a long way in providing hope and support to that individual. So those are my sources. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day, especially during Suicide Prevention Month, to be able to learn these potentially life-saving skills and just increase your overall competency in supporting a loved one with their mental health. So thank you all so much, and I'd like to open the floor for questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Jazz. Very informative, honestly. I feel like there are a lot of questions that I may have had that you answered also. And also, I appreciate the fact that you debunked some myths that are like usually generally believed around suicide. I think one main one would be, how if you feel that a loved one or someone that you know is already struggling with mental health or suicidal ideation, that talking about it is just going to push them towards towards actually doing it. And I think that that's a very good one to know. We also have questions about other couple myths around suicide. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I think one main one that I want your opinion on is well, two actually. To people who talk about suicide are just seeking attention, and people who take their own lives are selfish or cowards or weak. And I just want your professional opinion on both of these myths.
Yeah, of course. So, in my experience, in this field, working in suicide prevention, I have heard those commonly held myths. It seems like a lot of people, kind of feel that same way, as you're experiencing. So, regarding the first myth that individuals, who may exhibit these warning signs are quote unquote like attention seeking. It really, I view it as they're trying to let individuals know that they need support. They're letting them know that they can't do this alone. And, I think sometimes additional attention is needed. So it's not, as opposed to, they're only doing it for attention. That's the sole reason. But at the end of the day, I think if we notice that these individuals are experiencing the signs and the warning signs that we discussed, data shows that that is indicative that they could be contemplating suicide even. So it's always worthwhile to just check in with that individual, offer support, let them know that they're not going through this alone, and that there is hope and support out there. Even sharing 988, for example, I know sometimes people feel that they may not have the capacity to be that supportive person for an individual who may be experiencing these warning signs. But you may be able to connect them with then a mental health clinician or connect them to these resources that can be accessed at any time, right? 988 crisis text line, they're always available. So I think, at the end of the day, while I acknowledge, that sometimes people view it as attention seeking, it may be true that they're crying out for help, and that they need, someone to kind of step in and let them know that they're not alone. Because we always want to take action, um, because suicide is a tragedy and suicide can be prevented.
Thank you for that. And I think that's another one, right? I mean, suicide can be prevented. Is it unpredictable? Yes. But can it be prevented? Yes. Um, so thank you for that. And honestly, thank you for this great presentation. It was really informative. Why, just to close it out, why do you think it's important to keep talking about this and uplifting suicide prevention, not just this month or yesterday, but just have it be not such a taboo conversation that people are able to have?
Mhm. So I think one of the reasons why it can seem, taboo is that, and there's a lot of stigma associated with it, is that there's a lot of misinformation about the act of suicide and even just mental illness and mental health struggles in general. I think that, if we look historically, individuals who may be, struggling with their mental health have, been, criticized, they've been shunned, they've been removed from society, when in actuality, what the studies show and what the data tells us is that reaching out and offering community with that individual and letting them know that they're not alone, really goes such a long way in ensuring that, we create a space and a community that is open-minded, that is, accessible, and that people understand that you can rely on one another to, seek help and gain that additional support that individuals may need. Because at the end of the day, we all have bad days, we all struggle sometimes. Like, of course, it's a spectrum, but sometimes reaching out to individuals, or even, contacting your loved ones and saying, hey, I'm having a rough day, I could use some support. Even if someone sends you, a heart, or, any form or of acknowledgement that they care about you, that they see you, I think really goes such a long way to decreasing that stigma and letting people know that there is support and there's hope and there's healing out there. It's just changing the dynamic and changing the perspective as to, instead of viewing individuals who may struggle with their mental health or may even go on to contemplate suicide as other, recognizing that we all struggle and that is a universal experience, right? We all have bad days. And while it may not be to that same extent, we can relate on a human level and realize that, I would appreciate some support if I was feeling that way, right? I would want to know that I was not alone.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition. Thank you. Thank you to Adam H, our partners at Adam H and Mental Health America of Ohio for providing all of these opportunities and training opportunities also as well. So we will put some of your information on our YouTube page once we upload this video. But if anyone has any questions or wants to learn more about what the Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition is doing and all the services and resources they offer, please visit them at franklincountysPC.org. And they have a Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, LinkedIn. So please reach out to them. And thank you so much again for your time.
Of course, thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, you too.